Hey guys, it's Nathan here. Just finished getting some gas and I wanted to do a quick video. This is a question that I've been asked a bunch of times, both on and offline. Darn it, I really wanted that spot. Anyway, so question I've been asked a lot, both on and offline, and that is, what is a good motorcycle for a beginner? And really, what should you look for in your first motorcycle? Because I don't really think there's one or even a handful of motorcycles that are going to be the best to start out on for every rider. So the way I look at it, there's kind of four things that go into the decision. There is your experience, your budget, your risk tolerance, and your riding style. And all four of those kind of go together a little bit, and they kind of balance each other a little bit. So I think to start out with, the first thing you should really think about is what kind of riding style you like, or what style of motorcycle you're looking for. So if you are into Harleys, you want a cruiser, something like that, there's going to be something you can find in that realm that's going to work good for beginners. Similarly, if you like sport bikes or standards or touring or whatever, adventure bikes, there's going to be something you can find that's suitable for a beginner. That's the kind of thing that I don't necessarily think it makes a lot of sense to compromise on from the beginning, because it's how you're going to be comfortable on a bike. You're going to enjoy it a lot more. I don't think it necessarily makes sense to go out and get a giant Goldwing or an 800-pound Harley to start out with, or I would stay away from leader bikes, because even if you like sport bikes, that doesn't mean you need to get the fastest one ever made. If you get the kind of bike that you enjoy, you're going to like riding a lot more, and you're going to be able to get experience quicker because you don't mind headed out. And most people like to get a bike that they know people that have similar bikes, or they want to go find people. Like I have a bunch of friends with Ducatis, and it's fun to go all ride Ducatis together. We can do things like Ducati Island and MotoGP, and we'll head to the dealership together if we got to go get parts or go get serviced or whatever. And that's something that, I mean, if you can get the kind of bike you want, why not get it from the beginning? So a lot of people have trouble deciding between new and used. Starting out, used definitely is going to make more sense. The trick is really to get something that's small, usually around 200 to 300 cc's. You could go a little bit bigger, but if you get something around that size and 3 to 5 years old, you can probably find it for about $2,000 to $3,000 and sell it for the exact same price in 6-9 months, maybe a year, depending on how much you ride, once you're a little bit more comfortable. And that dude has AstroTurf on his tailgate. You see a lot of weird things in Austin, and that is far from the weirdest I've seen, but still pretty strange. But yeah, personally, I bought a new bike. I got the Monster 696 straight from a dealership, but my situation was a little bit different. I had an old leaky Mustang that was about 15 years old now, that used to be great, but didn't age so well. And my wife wanted me to get something that wasn't going to require hardly any maintenance, wasn't going to make any messes. So it was actually her idea. I was going to buy something used, but she wanted me to get new, so that's what I got. And hey, if your wife is going to argue with you to buy nicer motorcycles, it's not the worst place to be. After you think about the style and what your budget is, the next thing to really think about is what size bike is suitable for you. And that's going to depend a lot on both your experience level and your risk tolerance. You see a lot of people that have many, many years of riding experience that are still on relatively tame motorcycles. And it's not that they can't handle a large bike, it's that they just don't feel any need for it. They're out to just ride, to cruise and enjoy, and they want to keep themselves safe first and foremost while enjoying motorcycling, because there's definitely some risk involved and you can't deny that, but it's all about managing the level of risk. I think just as many experienced riders you see on tame bikes, you see people with absolutely no experience buying Hayabusas and Gixxer 1000s, and those are people that the experience to risk tolerance balance has probably swayed from adventurous to crazy, because you got to keep them balanced. Give yourself a very low risk tolerance when you don't have experience, even if you naturally would have a higher one, and cool it off for a bit while you're getting used to riding. And as you get more experienced, as you learn to handle the bike and handle traffic situations, you can start to increase the risks you're willing to take. And the reason why it's good to start out on a smaller bike is it's really not the size of the engine or the power. What you want to be careful of is how the bike delivers that power. If it has a very sharp throttle response, what gets you in trouble is not being able to predict the power. So what you'll see a lot of riders do is they'll pull back on the throttle and they're not expecting it, so they get ripped back off their bike, and then they grab another fistful of throttle and just make the problem worse. That actually happened to me one time when I was just starting out. I was pulling out of a parking space downtown, headed facing the street, because it's all back in parking, and the light on the other side had just turned green. I had no cars on my side, so I was in a hurry to get out, and I gunned it a little bit more than I normally would to get ahead of the cars, and I didn't have my wheel turned at all, so I was headed straight for oncoming traffic. I ended up turning before I crossed the double yellow, so I was fine, but it really caught me off guard. That's probably the closest call I've had. I've had my rear wheel start to slip before a couple times, but I always felt it slipped, eased off the throttle gently, and regained traction without any problems. But that'll definitely wake you up the first couple times it happens, because you definitely feel the rear wheel start to slip. But as far as gauging your experience, what's going to be most relevant is, hey, it's the Chive bus. The experience is going to help you the most. When you start to ride, it's going to be if you've ridden motorcycles or dirt bikes in the past when you were younger, especially if you've done so competitively. Say you've raced dirt bikes. I raced mountain bikes and had ridden dirt bikes a lot in like junior high and high school when I was younger. So I knew that would probably allow me to ride a little bit larger of a motorcycle starting out. But just come to your buying decision assuming 250, 300 range and work up from there. So if you start at 300 and you say, well, I've been riding dirt bikes for 5 years, okay, you can probably bump it up to 500, 600. Or if you are just generally athletic, I raced mountain bikes. I didn't race dirt bikes, but I also drove a stick shift, and kind of thinking about shifting and being comfortable on two wheels and having the balance and having the risk analysis, because I actually rode a mountain bike for pretty much every day for a year before I got a motorcycle. And you're obviously not going as fast and you're not in traffic quite as much, but you have to be just as alert riding a bike as you do on a motorcycle. So those were the kind of things that collectively made me a little bit more comfortable with something bigger. And I mean, can you go buy a liter bike or bigger as a beginner? Sure, absolutely. Especially nowadays with riding modes like this bike. If you want a new bike and you want something with traction control and you want something with ABS, this is absolutely something doable as your first bike. If you're getting something with a ton of power as your first bike, you really want to try to find something that is going to manage that power for you while you're starting out. I know a lot of people that believe that you should turn off all computer assists as you're becoming a better rider. I agree and disagree, because I think there's situations where it helps. I think definitely as the electronic aids are getting more powerful and more intelligent, it's going to come to the point where it's better than riders are, just period. You can't control the throttle as well as a computer can. So I think from a safety aspect, they make sense. If we were all trying to be as safe as possible, we would just be riding around in Abrams. And we obviously aren't, so there's a balance there. A stick shift sports car is probably not going to be as fast as its automatic brother, but people are still going to want to stick shift because that's part of your experience. But when you're starting out, I think it's important to have something that's going to probably limit your horsepower and something that's going to catch you in case you get yourself into trouble. Because something more than 100 horsepower is probably more than you need starting out. So if you get a bike like this one, you can cut it down to 80 horsepower and then ride it full about 112 horsepower later once you get a little bit more comfortable. And that gives you a bike that you can grow into for a while. And again, I wouldn't recommend that for everybody, but if you want to buy a new bike and you want to buy a big bike, something that is going to give you some room to grow safely is going to help out a lot. As far as individual bikes, used bikes, you can kind of get all kinds of things. I'd probably recommend something about 5 years old or so, because you don't want it to just be a complete maintenance nightmare, but you also want it to be cheap. A Ninja 250 or 300 or so is a good starting point to look at, but I mean, it depends on what you want. Honda makes a bunch of great ones. I think for me, if you were going to buy a new bike, probably my favorite to start out would be a Honda CB300F. And if you want something a little bit bigger, they make the 500F. I think that's kind of a great all-around compromise bike that is going to make sense in a lot of different situations. It's their kind of sport standard naked bike, which is more my style, and they have the CVR if you want something fully fared as more of a super sport. But it is going to help with insurance if you don't have something that's fully fair to begin with. And that's also another reason to start smaller, because they're definitely going to nail you your first year or two riding. Other bikes, as far as Ducatis go, a lot of people choose between the 696 Monster, the A21, the Ducati Scrambler, or the Hyper Motard. Depending on your riding style, I think all of those are perfectly fine to start with. Between the 696 and the A21, personally, I think the A21 is a much, much better motorcycle. It's also considerably more expensive, so keep that in mind. But in favor of the 696, it's going to be a little bit smaller. It has way more accessories and aftermarket parts. I was actually pretty surprised how difficult it was to find parts for this thing. I thought that since the 1200S was around for a while, that it would be easier, but it really wasn't. So, if you're going to be keeping your first bike for a while, you may want to look at accessories. If you plan on getting rid of it in 6 months to a year, you may be better served to just save that money for your next bike, because adding parts like exhausts and everything, that's not going to add value to your bike. It will help it not depreciate as quickly, but on when you buy a bike used, it's really not going to make much of a difference. You'll see bikes that have like $4,000 of parts added, and it may bring up the price $500, maybe $1,000. So if you're looking for a bike to flip pretty quickly, don't put a lot of money in parts on it. Maybe put some stickers on it, I don't know. But if you do get stuff, buy stuff that is going to transfer to your next bike. You could do things like bar-end mirrors, maybe new grips, because starting out, a lot of the stuff you're going to want to buy is really the gear and kind of accessories. Like you're going to need probably new backpacks, storage options, phone cases, all kinds of accessory. Man. And that's one thing I forgot to mention. Hey there, Monster. What you're going to want to do before you even start looking at bikes is budget for and purchase all of your safety gear before you even think about buying a bike. You're going to want to get, at the very, very, very minimum, a helmet and I think a jacket and gloves. I'm never going to ride, unless it's maybe like 100 feet to my mailbox, I'm never going to ride without my helmet and gloves and really my jacket. Sometimes, if I'm riding downtown a block or two, I'll just grab a helmet and gloves and leave my jacket because it gets pretty stinking hot around here. But helmet and gloves are a definite necessity, so do that first. And with everything, it's really just a thought process. There's no magic bullet as far as bikes go. It's all going to be take some suggestions, think about what makes sense for you, and then work from there. Alright guys, well I'm here. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, definitely let me know in the comments.